Daniel had always been that guy. You know the type. The one who could make the entire office laugh during the most boring Monday morning meeting. The guy who had a comeback for everything, a joke ready before you even finished your sentence. At 32 years old, he'd spent the better part of a decade perfecting this version of himself. But here's the thing about being funny all the time. It's exhausting, and more importantly, it keeps people from getting too close, which was exactly what Daniel wanted, even if he'd never admitted to anyone, not even himself. The marketing firm where Daniel worked had a reputation for being casual and fun. Beanbags in the break room, a ping-pong table nobody actually used, and enough coffee to fuel a small city. It was the kind of place where wearing a suit would make you stand out more than showing up in flip-flops. Daniel fit right in. He was the unofficial morale booster. The guy management secretly loved because he made people actually want to come to work. Everything was comfortable, predictable, safe. Then, she walked in. It was a Tuesday morning when the new financial analyst showed up. Daniel was at the coffee machine, halfway through telling a story about his disastrous weekend attempt at cooking when he noticed her. She stood near the reception desk, holding a leather portfolio and wearing a gray blazer that looked professional without trying too hard. Her dark hair was pulled back simply, and she had this calm way of standing that made everyone else in the room seem too loud. "That's the new girl," whispered Jake from accounting, appearing next to Daniel with his own empty mug. "Started today. Finance department." Daniel watched as their boss, Patricia, shook her hand and began the standard welcome tour. The woman smiled politely, nodded at the right moments, but there was something different about her. She didn't have that nervous energy most new employees carried on their first day. She just seemed composed. "What do you think?" Jake nudged him. "Your type?" Daniel snorted. "Everyone's my type according to you." But he kept watching as Patricia led her around the office, introducing her to different team members. Each time someone shook her hand, she made eye contact, really looked at them like she was actually interested in remembering who they were. Not the fake interested way people do at networking events, something genuine. By lunchtime, word had spread fast, as it always did in offices. Her name was Lily. She'd moved from Boston. She had a master's degree in finance and had worked for some impressive companies. She was single, someone helpfully added, though Daniel hadn't asked. The whole team ended up going to the usual lunch spot, a sandwich place 2 blocks away that gave them a discount. Lily came along, sitting near the end of the long table they'd pushed together. Daniel sat in his usual spot in the middle, where he could hold court and keep the conversation moving. "So, Lily," called out Patricia from the head of the table. "We do this big charity gala every year in December. It's actually a really nice event. Black tie, fancy venue, the whole deal. I hope you'll come." Lily nodded, taking a sip of her water. "That sounds lovely." "What's the charity?" "Local arts programs for kids," Patricia explained. "We raise money and some of our employees perform. We've got some real talent here." Daniel saw his opening. He leaned back in his chair, that familiar grin spreading across his face. "Well, Lily, I'll tell you what. If you can survive a whole month working with this bunch of chaos, I'll marry you myself at that gala." The table erupted. People laughed. Someone threw a napkin at him. Jake choked on his sandwich. It was exactly the reaction Daniel expected and wanted. But Lily didn't laugh. She didn't blush or roll her eyes or shoot back a witty response. She just looked at him for a moment, and something in her dark eyes made Daniel feel like she could see right through his usual routine. Then she smiled, a small, polite smile, and turned her attention back to her lunch. "You're terrible," laughed Patricia, shaking her head at Daniel. "What? I'm a catch," Daniel protested, playing it up. "Lily, you're already turning down the opportunity of a lifetime. That's just poor decision-making for someone in finance." This got another round of laughs. Lily glanced his way again, and this time she spoke. "I'll keep that in mind," she said softly. And somehow, even though her voice was quiet, everyone heard her. Then she went back to her conversation with the person next to her. Daniel felt oddly deflated. Usually his jokes landed better than that. Usually people played along, gave him something to work with. But Lily had just acknowledged him and moved on, like he was background noise. Over the next few weeks, Daniel found himself noticing Lily more than he wanted to. She was always punctual, always prepared in meetings, always had her work done ahead of schedule. She was polite to everyone, remembered people's names immediately, and had this way of listening when people talked that made them feel heard. But she never joined in the office gossip. Never came out for happy hour drinks. Never really laughed at Daniel's jokes, though she'd offer that same small smile. It started to bug him if he was honest, not in an angry way, but in a way he couldn't quite figure out. He found himself trying harder around her, cracking better jokes, being extra charming. Nothing. Just polite acknowledgement and then back to whatever she was doing. She doesn't like me, Daniel said one afternoon to his cubicle neighbor, Kevin. Kevin looked up from his computer screen. Who? Lily? The new finance girl? How do you know? Daniel shrugged. She barely talks to me. Every time I try to be funny, she just smiles and walks away. Kevin laughed. Maybe she's just not into office comedians. Not everyone needs to laugh at your jokes, man. Everyone laughs at my jokes, Daniel countered. Exactly, Kevin said, turning back to his screen. Maybe that's your problem. Daniel sat at his desk, staring at his screen without really seeing it. Kevin's words stuck with him. Maybe that was his problem. He'd built his entire personality around being funny, being liked, being the guy everyone wanted at lunch. But what happened when someone didn't buy into that? What happened when someone looked past the jokes and didn't seem impressed by what they saw? He glanced across the office to where Lily sat at her desk, completely focused on her work. Her desk was neat, organized. A single framed photo faced her. Though Daniel couldn't see what it was, a small plant sat in the corner, actually thriving, unlike the dead succulents scattered around most people's workspaces. Who was she, really? What made someone so put together, so contained? And why did Daniel suddenly care so much? He turned back to his computer, trying to focus on the presentation he was supposed to be creating. But his mind kept wandering back to that first lunch, to the way she'd looked at him when he made that joke about marrying her. Like she'd already figured him out in that single moment. Like she knew all his tricks and wasn't interested in playing along. It unsettled him in a way he couldn't explain. And Daniel hated feeling unsettled almost as much as he hated feeling vulnerable. So he did what he always did. He made another joke, louder this time, getting the whole office laughing. And if his eyes drifted to Lily's desk to see if she was watching, well, that was nobody's business but his own. 3 months had passed since Lily joined the company, and Daniel was starting to realize something uncomfortable. He thought about her way too much for someone who barely knew her. It started small. He'd catch himself looking for her car in the parking lot when he arrived at work. He'd notice when she changed her usual coffee order from black to a latte. He'd pay attention during meetings when she spoke, actually listening instead of thinking about his next joke. And the weird part? She still treated him exactly the same way she had on day one. Polite, pleasant, distant. "You're staring again," Kevin said, without looking up from his laptop. They were in a budget meeting, arguably the most boring kind of meeting that existed. Lily was presenting a quarterly financial report, and Daniel had been watching her for the past 10 minutes. Not in a creepy way, he told himself. He was just observing. "I'm not staring. I'm listening," Daniel whispered back. "Sure you are." Daniel shifted in his seat, trying to focus on the spreadsheet being projected on the screen, but his mind kept wandering. There was something about the way Lily explained complex financial data that fascinated him. She didn't talk down to people. She didn't use confusing jargon to sound smart. She just broke everything down simply, clearly, like she actually wanted people to understand. "As you can see here," Lily was saying, pointing to a graph, "we're actually performing better than projected in 3 key areas. If we maintain this trajectory and reallocate some resources, we could exceed our annual goals by about 15%. Patricia nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, Lily. This is exactly the kind of insight we need." The meeting wrapped up and everyone started filing out. Daniel hung back, pretending to check his phone. He watched as Lily gathered her papers, closed her laptop with that same careful precision she did everything with. "Hey, Lily," he called out before he could stop himself. She looked up, waiting. "That was really impressive. The presentation, I mean. You made all those numbers actually make sense." For a second, something flickered in her expression. "Surprise, maybe?" "Thank you," she said. "That's kind of you to say. I'm serious. Most people in finance just throw charts at us and hope we nod along." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. It was the first time she'd really looked at him with something other than polite acknowledgement. Well, what's the point of analyzing data if you can't communicate what it means? Numbers tell stories too. Most people just don't know how to listen. Numbers tell stories, Daniel repeated. I like that. Lily picked up her materials. I should get back to my desk. But thank you, Daniel, really. She left, and Daniel stood there in the empty conference room, feeling like something significant had just happened, even though it was just a 30-second conversation. As autumn turned colder, the office buzz started building around the annual charity gala. It was scheduled for the first Saturday in December, and apparently it was a big deal. People who'd been with the company for years talked about performances from previous galas like they were legendary events. You performing this year? Jake asked Daniel one afternoon. Maybe. I did that comedy bit last year. Might do it again. You should. Everyone loved it. Jake leaned against Daniel's cubicle. Hey, speaking of the gala, you know Lily's performing, right? Daniel's head snapped up. What? No, how do you know that? Patricia mentioned it. Asked her to sign up, and apparently Lily agreed. Doing what? Jake shrugged. No idea. Singing, maybe? Does she seem like a singer to you? Daniel tried to picture Lily on stage and couldn't. She was so private, so contained. The idea of her performing in front of 200 people seemed completely out of character. I have no idea what she seems like, he admitted. Well, you've got a few weeks to figure it out, Jake said, walking away. The gala became all anyone talked about. Daniel volunteered for everything like he always did. He'd do his comedy routine, help with setup, probably jump in on the group song number that accounting always put together. Staying busy meant not thinking too hard about things. It's how he'd always operated, but he kept wondering about Lily. What would she do? Would she actually go through with it? He tried to find natural ways to bring it up, but Lily was impossible to pin down for casual conversation. She was always on her way somewhere, always had something she needed to finish, not rude about it, just busy, focused. Then one Thursday afternoon, Daniel was walking past the break room when he heard it. Piano music, just a few notes, someone humming along. He poked his head in and saw Lily standing by the window looking at her phone. The music was coming from her earbuds, but it was turned up loud enough that he could hear it faintly. She noticed him and quickly pulled out an earbud. Sorry, is it too loud? No, not at all. What are you listening to? She glanced at her phone screen. Rachmaninoff, Piano Concerto No. 2. Classical music? Sometimes. When I need to focus. She seemed slightly embarrassed, like she'd been caught doing something private. Is that what you're performing at the gala? Piano? Lily's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. Maybe, I haven't decided for sure. You play piano? I used to. It's been a while. Daniel wanted to ask more, wanted to keep her talking, but he could see her shutting down. Well, if you do perform, I'm sure it'll be great, he said. Trying to sound casual, thanks. She put her earbud back in. A clear signal that the conversation was over. Daniel walked back to his desk, his mind racing. Lily played piano. Classical piano. Rachmaninoff, whoever that was. It was the first real personal thing he'd learned about her in 3 months. The next few weeks crawled by. The office was decorated for the holidays. Someone put up a countdown to the gala on the bulletin board. Daniel watched Lily during this time, and he noticed something. She seemed different. More nervous, maybe? She'd tap her fingers on her desk sometimes like she was practicing something. She'd stare off into space during lunch, clearly somewhere else in her mind. One afternoon, Daniel overheard Patricia talking to Lily by the coffee machine. You're sure you're comfortable performing? I don't want you to feel pressured. I'm sure, Lily said quietly. I think it's time. Time for what? To play again. Publicly, I mean. It's been 5 years. Patricia touched Lily's arm gently. Your mother would be proud. Daniel quickly walked away before they could see him eavesdropping. Your mother would be proud. What did that mean? 5 years since she'd played publicly. Why had she stopped? He sat at his desk staring at his computer screen without seeing it. There were layers to Lily he'd never imagined. Real depth, real history. And he'd spent 3 months making jokes and trying to be charming, never once actually trying to know her. The day before the gala, the office was buzzing with excitement. People left early to get ready, pick up their formal wear from the cleaners, all that stuff. Daniel hung around longer than usual, not quite ready to go home to his empty apartment. He was packing up his things when he noticed Lily was still at her desk too. She was just sitting there, hands folded in her lap, staring at something on her desk. that photo frame he'd noticed months ago. Without thinking, Daniel walked over. "Hey." She looked up and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before. Vulnerability. Fear, maybe. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, but it wasn't convincing. "Just nervous about tomorrow. You're going to be amazing. I don't even know what you're playing, but I know that." "How could you possibly know that?" Daniel thought about it for a moment. "Because you don't do anything halfway. I've watched you for 3 months. Everything you do completely. So whatever you're playing tomorrow, you've probably prepared for it like it's the most important thing in the world." Lily's eyes got a little shiny, like she might cry, but she blinked it away. "That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me." "I should have said nice things sooner. Real things, I mean. Not just jokes." She gave him that small smile, but this time it reached her eyes. "See you tomorrow, Daniel. See you tomorrow." He left the office feeling like everything was about to change. He just didn't know how much. The hotel ballroom looked like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm light over tables covered in white linens. A stage had been set up at the far end with velvet curtains and professional lighting. Daniel had been to this event before, but somehow it felt different this year. More important, he'd spent an embarrassing amount of time getting ready. 3 different shirts before settling on one. He'd even gotten a haircut that afternoon. When he looked at himself in the mirror before leaving his apartment, he barely recognized the nervous guy staring back at him. "Get it together," he'd told his reflection. "It's just a work event." But it wasn't just a work event. Not anymore. Daniel arrived early, which was unusual for him. The ballroom was already half full, people mingling with drinks in hand. The bar in the corner was doing good business. A jazz trio played softly in the background, setting the mood before the main performances started. He grabbed a drink and tried to look casual, like he wasn't scanning the room for one specific person. Kevin found him first. "Look at you, all cleaned up," Kevin said, adjusting his own bow tie. "You actually look nervous." "I've never seen you nervous." "I'm not nervous. I don't know. Tonight feels weird." "It's because you're waiting to see if Lily shows up." Daniel shot him a look. "Am I that obvious?" "To everyone except maybe Lily, yeah." Kevin clapped him on the shoulder. "Relax, enjoy the night. You're performing too, remember? Your comedy bit?" "Right. Yeah." Daniel had almost forgotten about his own performance. He'd done the same routine last year. Some jokes about office life, impressions of their boss. People had loved it. But suddenly it felt shallow. Cheap, more people filtered in. Patricia arrived with her husband. Jake showed up with a date. The room filled with laughter and conversation. Daniel kept one eye on the entrance, waiting. And then she walked in. Lily wore a simple navy dress that somehow made every other woman in the room look overdressed. Her hair was down for the first time since Daniel had known her, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She wasn't wearing much makeup, didn't need to. She looked elegant in a way that had nothing to do with trying. Daniel forgot how to breathe for a second. She stood near the doorway, clutching a small purse, looking slightly overwhelmed by the crowd. Her eyes scanned the room, and for just a moment they landed on Daniel. She gave him a small nod, an acknowledgement before Patricia swept over to greet her. "You're staring again," Kevin said. "Shut up." The evening progressed with dinner first. Daniel ended up at a table with Kevin, Jake, and some people from marketing. Lily sat several tables away with Patricia and the finance team. He caught himself looking over there more times than he could count, watching her pick at her food, watching her smile politely at whatever conversation was happening around her. After dinner, the performances began. The lights dimmed, and the MC, one of the senior partners, took the stage. "Welcome, everyone, to our 10th annual charity gala. Tonight, we celebrate not just our company's success, but our commitment to giving back to the community. All proceeds from tonight go directly to funding arts programs for underprivileged youth in our city." Applause filled the room. "We have an incredible lineup of talent tonight from our very own employees. So sit back, enjoy, and remember to bid generously in our silent auction." The first performance was a group from sales singing a pop medley. They were energetic, if not exactly on key. The crowd loved it anyway. Then came a magic act from someone in IT that was surprisingly good. A few more performances followed. Each one met with enthusiastic applause. Daniel was scheduled to go on next. He stood up, straightened his jacket, and made his way toward the stage. As he passed Lily's table, their eyes met again. She gave him an encouraging smile, and it steadied something inside him. He took the stage and launched into his routine. The jokes landed well. People laughed in all the right places. He did his impression of Patricia that always killed. More laughter. He was on autopilot, hitting every beat he'd planned, but halfway through something shifted. He looked out at the audience, at all these people he worked with, people he'd been entertaining for years. And he realized he didn't want to be the funny guy anymore, or at least not just the funny guy. He wanted to be real. He wanted to be seen the way Lily seemed to see everyone, with actual depth and honesty. He wrapped up his set to strong applause and left the stage feeling empty despite the success. Back at his table, Kevin gave him a high five. "Killed it, man." "Yeah," Daniel said, but his heart wasn't in it. A few more performances happened. A poetry reading, someone playing guitar and singing a folk song. Each act was met with warm appreciation from the crowd. Then the MC returned to the microphone. "Our next performer is someone special. Lily Chen joined our finance team just 3 months ago, but in that short time she's already made an incredible impact. Tonight she's agreed to share her musical gift with us. Please welcome Lily to the stage, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, second movement." The room went quiet as people settled in their seats. Daniel felt his pulse quicken. Lily stood from her table and walked toward the stage. She moved with purpose, her head held high, but Daniel could see the slight tremor in her hands. She climbed the steps to the stage where a beautiful grand piano sat under a spotlight. She sat on the bench, adjusted it slightly, and placed her hands on the keys. For a long moment she just sat there, eyes closed, breathing slowly. The entire ballroom held its breath. Then she opened her eyes, looked down at the keys, and began to play. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant. But within seconds the hesitation disappeared. The music swelled, filling every corner of the room with something Daniel couldn't name. It was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. It was honest, raw. Like Lily had opened up her chest and was showing everyone her heart. Daniel's smile faded. The joking mask he wore slipped completely away. He leaned forward in his seat, unable to look anywhere but at her. The music moved through different emotions like waves. Sadness that made his throat tight, hope that lifted something in his chest, longing that hurt in the best way. Every note was perfect, but it wasn't the technical skill that caught him. It was the emotion. The story she was telling without words. Around him, conversations had stopped completely. 200 people sat in absolute silence, transfixed. Daniel saw tears on several faces. He felt wetness on his own cheeks and realized he was crying too, something he hadn't done in years. This was who Lily really was. Not the quiet analyst who kept to herself. Not the polite woman who smiled at his jokes without really engaging. This was her soul, expressed in a way that made every defense Daniel had ever built feel pathetic and small. Her fingers moved across the keys with confidence and grace, and Daniel understood something profound. She hadn't been cold or distant these past 3 months. She'd simply been waiting to see if anyone would bother to look past the surface, waiting to see if anyone deserved to see this part of her. And he'd spent all that time making jokes, hiding behind humor, too scared to be vulnerable himself. The music built to a crescendo, notes tumbling over each other in a cascade of sound that seemed impossible for two hands to create. Daniel watched her face, saw her completely lost in the music, and felt something crack open inside his chest. This was what it meant to be brave. Not telling jokes to a crowd, not being the life of the party, but opening yourself up completely, showing people who you really are, risking their judgment and rejection for the chance at genuine connection. The final notes hung in the air, delicate and haunting before slowly fading to silence. The silence after the final note stretched for what felt like forever. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire ballroom seemed frozen in time, caught in the spell of what they'd just witnessed. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in. Within seconds, the entire room erupted into thunderous applause. People stood from their seats, a standing ovation building like a wave. Daniel stood too, his hands coming together automatically, but he couldn't take his eyes off Lily. She sat at the piano, her hands still resting on the keys, looking almost surprised by the reaction. Like she'd forgotten there were people watching. Like she'd been somewhere else entirely and was just now coming back. She stood slowly, gave a small bow, and as she did, Daniel saw her eyes scanning the crowd. They found him. For just a heartbeat, their gazes locked. In that moment, Daniel felt completely exposed. Like she could see everything he'd been thinking, everything he'd felt during her performance. Like all his defenses were gone and there was nowhere left to hide. He wanted to look away but couldn't. Then Lily broke the connection, offered another small bow to the audience, and walked off the stage. The applause continued even after she disappeared behind the curtain. Daniel sat down heavily, his legs suddenly weak. Kevin was saying something next to him, probably congratulating him on his own performance earlier or commenting on Lily's. But Daniel couldn't process the words. His mind was too full, too overwhelmed with everything he was feeling. "You okay, man?" Kevin asked, actually sounding concerned now. "Yeah," Daniel managed. I need some air." He stood and made his way through the tables toward the exit, barely registering the other performances that had already resumed on stage. He pushed through the ballroom doors and found himself in the hotel's lobby, quieter and cooler. He leaned against a wall and tried to get his thoughts in order. What had just happened to him? He'd watched someone play piano. That was it, but it felt like so much more. It felt like someone had reached inside his chest and rearranged everything, and he'd never be able to put it back the way it was. "Daniel?" He turned and saw Lily standing a few feet away. She'd changed quickly, he noticed. The navy dress was gone, replaced by dark jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back again, like she was trying to return to being invisible after revealing so much. "Hey," he said, his voice coming out rough. He cleared his throat. I don't even have words for what that was." She walked closer, hugging her arms around herself. "Thank you. I wasn't sure if I should do it. It's been so long since I played for anyone. Why did you stop, if you don't mind me asking?" Lily looked down at her hands, flexing her fingers like she was still feeling the keys. "My mother taught me to play. She was a professional pianist before she had me. Music was everything to her. Everything to both of us." She paused and Daniel waited, not pushing. "She died 5 years ago. Cancer. And after she was gone, I couldn't make myself play anymore. Every note just reminded me of what I'd lost." "I'm sorry," Daniel said quietly. "The thing is, she would have hated that. Me giving it up because of her. She always said music was how we speak when regular words aren't enough, that it was a gift meant to be shared." Lily looked up at him and her eyes were shiny with tears she was trying not to let fall. "So I've been trying to get back to it. Tonight was the first time I've played for an audience since her funeral." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Your mother would have been incredibly proud. That performance was—" "Lily, you have a gift." She used to say the same thing. A single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, almost embarrassed. "Sorry, I don't usually fall apart like this." "You're not falling apart. You're being human." She laughed softly, a sad sound. "Is that what this is?" They stood in silence for a moment. The muffled sounds of the gala continued from behind the closed ballroom doors. Daniel could hear applause, someone singing, the buzz of conversation during breaks. But out here in the lobby, it felt like they were in their own world. "Can I ask you something?" Lily said suddenly. "Of course. Why are you always joking? All the time, every conversation, why?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't know. I guess it's just who I am." "No, it's not." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I've been watching you two, these past few months. And I've noticed that whenever someone tries to have a real conversation with you, whenever things get even a little bit serious, you deflect with humor. You turn everything into a joke before it can turn into something genuine." Daniel felt defensive. "What's wrong with making people laugh?" "Nothing. Nothing at all. Making people laugh is wonderful." She took a step closer. "But Daniel, who makes you laugh? Who do you let in? Who actually knows you? Not just the performance you put on." He opened his mouth to answer and realized he didn't have one. When was the last time he'd had a real conversation with someone? When was the last time he'd been honest about anything that mattered? He had friends, sure. People he hung out with. But did any of them really know him? Did he even know himself anymore? "I don't know," he admitted finally, and the honesty of it felt strange in his mouth. "That first day at lunch when you made that joke about marrying me," Lily continued, "I could see it immediately. You use humor like armor. Like if you keep everyone laughing, they won't look too close at what's underneath. And I get it, I really do. We all protect ourselves somehow. Mine is being quiet, being contained. Yours is being loud and funny. But Daniel, it's exhausting, isn't it? Always being on? He stared at her, feeling more seen than he'd ever felt in his life. How do you do that? Do what? See people like that. Really see them. My mother taught me that too. She used to say that everyone's carrying something heavy. We just don't always show it. So she taught me to look closer, to listen better, to pay attention to what people don't say as much as what they do. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. This woman, this quiet woman he'd been making jokes around for months, had understood him better in 3 months than most people had in years. And instead of judging him for it, instead of being annoyed by his constant deflection, she'd just waited for him to be ready to drop the mask. Your performance tonight, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. Getting up there and being that vulnerable, showing everyone who you really are. I could never do that. Yes, you could. You just have to decide to. I don't know how. She smiled. That small smile he'd seen so many times. But now it felt different. Now it felt like she was letting him in on a secret. Start small. Start with one person. Start with being honest instead of funny. Even if it's scary. Even if it feels like you're standing naked in front of everyone. That sounds terrible, he said, and she laughed. A real laugh, not polite or restrained. It was a beautiful sound. It is terrible, she agreed. But it's also the only way to actually connect with people. The only way to let them see you. From inside the ballroom, they heard the MC announcing the final performance of the night. The gala would be wrapping up soon. People would start heading home. Their borrowed moment in the quiet lobby was ending. I should probably go back in, Lily said. Patricia will wonder where I disappeared to. Wait, Daniel said, and she paused. He took a breath, deciding to try what she'd suggested. To be honest instead of funny. These past 3 months I've been an idiot. Making those stupid jokes. Not taking the time to actually know you. And tonight, watching you play, I realized I've been missing out on something important. Someone important. Lily's expression softened. You weren't an idiot. You were just protecting yourself. Maybe. But I don't want to do that anymore. At least not with you. She studied him for a long moment, and Daniel fought the urge to make a joke, to lighten the heavy honesty hanging between them. He forced himself to just stand there, to let her see him trying. Okay, she said finally. No more armor. From either of us. Deal. They walked back into the ballroom together, and Daniel felt different. Lighter somehow, despite having just exposed more of himself than he had in years. As they found their respective tables, he caught her eye one more time across the room. She smiled at him, and he smiled back. No jokes, no deflection. Just two people finally being real with each other. And that, Daniel realized, was more terrifying and more wonderful than anything he'd ever experienced. Monday morning felt different. Daniel arrived at the office without his usual loud greeting, without immediately launching into a story about his weekend. He just walked in, got his coffee, and sat at his desk. Kevin noticed immediately. You feeling okay? Kevin asked, peering over the cubicle wall. Yeah, I'm good. Just thinking. That's new. Daniel smiled, but didn't take the bait. A few months ago, he would have made a self-deprecating joke about never thinking. Now he just shrugged and turned to his computer. The truth was, he hadn't stopped thinking since Saturday night. About Lily's performance. About their conversation in the lobby. About the person he'd been and the person he wanted to become. It was like someone had turned on a light in a room he'd been sitting in for years. And suddenly he could see all the furniture he'd been bumping into. Lily arrived at 9, just like always. She set her bag down at her desk, pulled out her laptop, and began her morning routine. But when she glanced up and caught Daniel looking, instead of just giving him that polite smile, she held his gaze for a moment. A real moment. Then she gave him a small wave. He waved back, feeling like a teenager with a crush. The days that followed were strange and new. Daniel found himself actually talking to people instead of performing for them. He asked questions and listened to the answers. He had lunch with different coworkers and discovered things about them he'd never known, despite working together for years. And slowly, carefully, he started talking to Lily. Real conversations. Not jokes or one-liners, but actual exchanges about real things. They discovered they both loved old movies. She was into classic Hollywood, those black and white films with sharp dialogue. He preferred action movies from the 80s. The cheesier, the better. They debated which was better over coffee one morning. and Daniel realized he was smiling not because he was trying to be charming, but because he was genuinely enjoying himself. "You're different," Patricia commented one afternoon, catching Daniel in the break room. "Quieter lately. Everything okay?" "Yeah," Daniel said, surprised to realize he meant it. "Everything's actually really good." Patricia smiled knowingly. "It's nice to see. The real you, I mean. He's pretty great too." 3 months passed. Winter turned toward spring. Daniel and Lily fell into an easy friendship that felt nothing like any relationship Daniel had ever had. They got coffee most mornings. They'd stay late sometimes, her working on reports while he finished presentations, just keeping each other company in the quiet office. He learned about her mother in small pieces, how she'd emigrated from Taiwan with nothing, how she'd worked 3 jobs while still practicing piano every night, how she'd believed music could say things that words couldn't, that it connected people across any language or culture. Lily learned about Daniel too, about his dad leaving when he was 8, about how his mom had worked constantly to support them, how Daniel had learned early that making her laugh was the only way to make her smile after long shifts, how somewhere along the way being funny became his entire identity because it was the only thing that felt safe. "You know what's weird?" Daniel said one evening. They were the last ones in the office, the sun setting through the windows, casting everything in orange light. "What?" Lily looked up from her laptop. "I've spent my whole adult life trying to make people like me. Being funny, being entertaining, but I've never felt more liked than I do now. Just being myself with you. Maybe because now people are actually liking you, not the performance you give them." "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't listening before." She grinned at him and he laughed. That night, walking to their cars in the parking lot, Daniel stopped. "Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure," he took a breath. This was the kind of thing the old Daniel would have made into a joke. But he was trying to be different, to be brave like she'd been on that stage. "Would you want to get dinner sometime?" "Not as co-workers. As, I don't know. More than that." Lily tilted her head, studying him in that way she did. "Are you asking me on a date, Daniel?" "I think I am. Yeah, definitely am." Okay. "Yes, I'd like that." He felt something bright and warm spread through his chest. "Really?" "Don't make me change my mind by acting all surprised." But she was smiling as she said it. Their first date was at a small Italian restaurant downtown. Daniel was nervous in a way he'd never been nervous before. He changed his shirt 3 times. He showed up 10 minutes early and had to wait in his car so he wouldn't look too eager. But when Lily walked up to the restaurant entrance, looking beautiful in a simple green dress, all the nervousness melted away, because it was just Lily, the person who'd seen past all his defenses and somehow still liked what she found. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. Their conversation flowed easily, interrupted only by laughter. Real laughter, not the loud forced kind Daniel used to do. When they disagreed about something, which was often, it felt playful instead of combative. "I'm having a really good time," Lily said as they left the restaurant. "Me too. Best first date I've ever had." "How many first dates have you had?" Daniel thought about it. "Honestly, not many. I was always too busy being the funny guy to actually let anyone close enough for a real date." They walked slowly through the downtown streets, in no hurry to end the evening. At one point, Lily slipped her hand into his and Daniel felt his heart skip. "Can I tell you something?" she said. "Anything. That first day when you made that joke about marrying me, I thought you were exactly the kind of guy I needed to avoid. All surface, no depth. Someone who'd never understand what it meant to feel things deeply. Ouch, but fair. But I was wrong. Or maybe not wrong, but incomplete. You had depth. You were just scared to show it. And once you did..." She stopped walking and turned to face him. "Once you did, I realized you were exactly the kind of person I'd been looking for. Someone brave enough to change. Someone willing to be real." Daniel looked at her standing there under the streetlight and felt something he'd been afraid to name. "I'm falling for you," he said. "Like really falling. And it terrifies me." "Good. Being terrified means it matters. Is this when I'm supposed to kiss you?" "Only if you want to." He did. And when their lips met, soft and tentative at first, then more sure, Daniel felt like everything in his life had been leading to this moment. All the jokes, all the masks, all the years of hiding had been worth it just to get here. To this person, to this feeling. Months later, at the next company gala, someone from accounting made a joke during dinner. "Hey Daniel, whatever happened to you saying you'd marry Lily?" That was hilarious, the table laughed, remembering. Daniel looked across the room to where Lily sat with Patricia's team. She was already looking at him, one eyebrow raised, waiting to see how he'd respond. The old Daniel would have made another joke, would have played it off with something clever and deflecting. Instead, he stood up, walked across the ballroom, and held out his hand to Lily. "What are you doing?" she asked, taking his hand anyway. Being honest. He led her to the middle of the floor, right where everyone could see them. Then he got down on one knee. The room went silent. Lily's hand flew to her mouth. "I made a joke about marrying you on your first day," Daniel said, his voice carrying in the quiet room. "And I was an idiot. Because I didn't know you. I didn't know how strong you are, how talented, how kind. I didn't know that you'd see past all my defense mechanisms and wait for me to be brave enough to be real. I didn't know you'd change my entire life." Tears were streaming down Lily's face now. "I'm not joking anymore," he continued. "Lily Chen, will you marry me?" She dropped to her knees in front of him, not bothering to wipe away the tears. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The ballroom erupted in applause, but Daniel barely heard it. He was too busy kissing the woman who'd taught him what it meant to be truly seen. To be vulnerable. To be loved not for the performance he gave, but for the person he actually was. Later, at the reception that followed their wedding a year later, Lily played piano. The same Rachmaninoff piece from that first gala. But this time when she finished, Daniel didn't just applaud. He stood and told everyone how that performance had changed his life. How it had shown him what real courage looked like. How sometimes you have to fall completely silent to finally hear what matters. And then, because he was still Daniel after all, he made everyone laugh with a story about their first date. But this time the laughter didn't feel like armor. It felt like joy. Like sharing something real with people who actually knew him. Lily squeezed his hand under the table and he squeezed back. No more masks, no more hiding. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unexpected way and decided to be brave enough to let it be real.